Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, and my name is Brant Hunt, I said, and then I want to tell you that simply my channel is Discerning What is True. Today is the 25th day of November 2023. Going to be reading from a particular book by Rene Swaller de Lubicz called The Temple and Man, The Secrets of Ancient Egypt. I really enjoy reading this particular guy. Um, because he's a thinker and looks at things differently than most people. Him and his wife went to Egypt and spent, I think, 15 years there. This book was written, I think, in 1947. Uh, they actually spent time there researching. They didn't go there for a month or two and then came home, which was what a lot of them did in that time period. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if they, money wise or whatever. I don't know if they got some type of money, given to them or whatever. But anyway, I want to read this particular book. I don't think I'm going to get through the whole book. It's not that thick of a book, but I think it's a very significant book. Another guy I like to read and have read already is a guy named Alvin Boyd Kuhn, Kuhn, who is a philosopher, a um, what do we call a cult philosopher. Occult doesn't mean devil, folks. Let's get it through your head. Most people just do not understand. In fact, the sad part, it seems as though Christianity itself is a cult. It's not teaching truth. That's a cult. They would point their fingers towards the Mormons, which frankly are probably a cult too. But the Christians are actually themselves are a cult because they're not telling the truth. They're telling people all kinds of things that basically are not true. That some guy named Jesus literally died on the cross for you. Well, Jesus, in reality, such and such cult me simply is that. Guess what? Um, it's a lie. It's just all it is. But most people don't. They don't study the Bibles. They don't look at that. They particularly trust their pastors. Um, anyway, the point simply is that we're going to be reading this particular book tonight, and so it's going to be really intriguing to hear from what he says. So let's get into it. Okay. The forward here simply says the appearance of this small book in 1949 created unusual large academic controversy in the renowned Department of Egyptology of the College of France that was in Paris. A amateur, quote unquote, Egyptologist, as the scholars must have labeled Swaller himself and his wife, have presented an entirely new and radical approach for the consideration of Egyptologists, archaeologists, archaeological, and historians in general, an approach that might have been ignored completely had it not been developed with such a great amount of forceful, detailed research, and had it not won over the complete acceptance and enthusiasm of several of the leading Egyptologists and archaeologists of that time, including Alexandria Barille, Barille, and C.H. Robichon, or spelled Robichon. We shall not go into the intriguing way in which the academic establishment circumvent a confrontation with the challenge posed by the temple of man. Not shall we examine how they attempted to dismiss this work through the well-known academic tactics of intentional silence. Instead, let us use these few pages to introduce this relatively little-known author, then to see what might be some of the major themes contained in this new Egyptology. That Swaller works opens before us. It is true that Swaller was not a qualified Egyptologist by academic standards. You see, this has been taking place, especially in the realm of science. Science itself today is become almost a joke. It's not true science anymore. It's something they have established themselves. It's the same way as looking at history. They've already basically decided what history is about, and they're not open-minded about looking at anything. And this is the problem with most people today. They're not really interested in actually, digging. But anyway, this guy's written a ton of books, so he wasn't a dumbo, you see. Instead of first spending years in the Egyptologist libraries of Europe, he, upon his first visit to Egypt, took up residence together with his family in a small hotel very near the Temple of Luxor, Luxor, and there he remained for more than 15 years of intense, uninterrupted study of this great monument of the 18th dynasty of pharaonic Egypt. Swaller was already a mature man by the time he arrived in Egypt. Let us therefore review briefly his early years. At about 18 years of age, Rene Swaller left his home in Alsace, France, after having completed an apprenticeship with his father in pharmacology chemistry, and went to Paris with the clarity of formulating intentions of learning the true nature of substance. In addition to studying modern chemistry and physics, that is, at this young age, he began reading every alchemy text he could find. Those of the 13th and 14th centuries, you see, as well as the 16th century's Rosicrucian texts and the more familiar works of Parcletius and Raymond Lull, Lull. For a period, he became interested in painting, was a student of Matisse, Matisse, but his main role among his contemporaries was that of a philosopher of nature. Thus, he influenced many artists in Paris at that time, such as Arp, Leger, Leger, and especially Prince Ovid de Lubicz, Winslow, the Lithuanian mystic poet and statesman, who in 1919 conferred his family title on Swaller as a means of expressing his admiration and gratitude. He served in the armed forces as a chemist during the First World War, and at the close of the war, he published a journal, followed by Valero, both dedicated to social reform and the difficult task of implementing peace. During the course of his personal development, he received the name Auric, A-O-R, signifying light of the higher mind. He's said to have continued his alchemy research during this period, and later while living among and guiding a contemporary community of students, scholars, and artists and craftsmen who had gathered around him at St. Maurice in the Swiss Alps. He produced alchemy glass with reds and blues, thought to compare with the stained glass of Chartres Cathedral, a feat no other chemist had been able to accomplish in the 600 years since the cathedral was constructed. It was during the years at St. Maurice that his philosophical and scientific vision coalesced around an understanding of the universal laws of harmony. Thus, it might be said that Swaller, in his preparation for Egypt, was that of a philosopher, in the sense that his entire life constituted an intense philosophical inquiry. His unique and intuitive way of seeing, in combination with a technical and scientific education, gave him the extraordinary insight into the values and objections motivated ancient science and theology. In Swaller de Lubicz, scrupulous examination of the AN and architecture of the Temple of Luxor, at least two concurrent levels are being developed at given points. One is the study of Egypt as a civilization that existed in a factual geographic place and time, including its peasants, even its people, mythology, social forms, its chronological unfolding, its monuments and artifacts. But this level is only a backdrop or support for another Egypt, which might be defined as a quality of intelligence. This is Egypt as a evocation of a particular utilization and expression of a universal power of higher intelligence. This Egypt is outside of chronological consideration. It is rather both a ever-present and reoccurring possibility of consciousness. In his approach to Egypt, Swaller stressed the view that in order to comprehend the significance of a heightened phase among man's varied historical expressions, we need to impose on ourselves the discipline of attempting to enter into the mentality of the people and the spirit of the time. To do so would mean more than just learning the language and symbols of the period under study. We must also awaken in ourselves a living inter-rapport with the material being researched and identify with it in a potentiality self-transforming manner. Of course, this idea can never be fully attained as our present consciousness is inevitably with us. But on the other hand, by continuing to sift all of history through our present rationalization individualized psychological mentality, we distort beyond recognition the content and meaning of the past. Yeah, we've been told many times that these people were stupid. And this way. Look, folks, there are over 7,600 pyramids in the whole world. Are you aware of that? Why would these people be building pyramids? And then the problem is simply is we're not at this time in our lives, at this point, we don't know how to build a pyramid as they did. We don't. We don't. You see, we have a little problem with being basically think we know it all and we don't know much at all. Anyway, let's go. This distortion often occurs when we try to interpret the great mythology cultures of Egypt or the Veda in India in particular. We tend to lose sight of the fact that these cultures were expressing a different mentality and values from ours, and that they had a completely different understanding of the goal and purpose of life. As a result, in all their science, art, and knowledge, their cultures used distinct modes and methods of symbolization. Schwartz found it necessary to inquire into the nature of symbolism itself in order even to arrive at an understanding of what a hieroglyph is. This he carried out in two small books, meaning Esotericism and Symbol, which I've already read that particular book, and then the Symbol and the Symbolic, which is another book that I'm working on reading also. English translation of which are forthcoming from Autumn Press. That these ancient people thought differently than we do, and that we must understand the difference if we are to study them properly. Seems oblivious, but an example will show how difficult it is to put this idea into practice. Rene Swaller explains in The Temple of Man, what we call Characters, that is the book company, 1957, that in the ancient temple civilization of Egypt, numbers, our most ancient form of symbol, did not simply designate quantities, but instead were considered to be concrete definitions of energetic formative principles of nature. The Egyptians called these energetic principles neters, Neters, a word which is conventionally rendered as gods. In consideration of the esoteric meaning of number, we must avoid the following mistake. 2 is not 1, and 1. It is not a compositive. It is the multiplying work. It is the notion of the plus in relation to the minus. It is a new unity. It is sexuality. It is the origins of nature, physics, the neter 2. It is the culmination, that is the separating moment of the full moon, for example. It is the line, the stick, so to speak, the movement, the way, the photon, Odin, the meter thought, Mercury, spirit. Also, when the ancients considered the process of mathematics multiplication, their mode of calculation has a direct relationship with natural life processes as well as metaphysics ones. Rene Swaller called this mode the principle of the crossing. Interesting, we today continue to symbolize multiplication with the sign of a cross. This crossing was not a sterile mental numerical manipulation, but a symbol for the process by which things enter into corporate existence. All births into nature requires a crossing of opposites. It can be the crossing of vertical and horizontal lines which give birth to the square. The first measurable surface, or male or female, giving birth to a new individual, or warp and weft, creating a fabric, or light and darkness, giving birth to tangible forms, or matter and spirit, giving birth to life itself. Thus, the vital linking up of the mental abstractions of calculation with its counterpart, its natural phenomenon, gave the ancient mathematicians a living and philosophical basis for his science. Similar, these ancient people did not use words as we do, that is, as symbols or sounds linked together, which have fixed, memorized associations and which we compose in sequence patterns within the mind. For them, words were of a musical nature, or more precisely speaking, was a process of generating sonar SONAR, fields, establishing a unique vibrational identity with the essential principle that underlies any object or form. The pharaonic intelligence that Swaller was dealing with reveals to us was not the visualizing, not the analytical, not the mentality we know, but a sonar intuitive mode. In the Egyptian temple, wrote Caspar Perot, the human voice is the instrument par excellence of the priest and the enchanter. It is the voice which seeks after the individual summons and makes the necessary objects into a reality. But as every one of the tones has its particular force, great care must be taken not to change their order or to substitute one for the other. Clearly, this approach is to the approach of what we call Egyptology, demands a quantitative change on our part if we are to enter into the pharaonic spirit. And this change in our thinking may offer us perspective, and not only on the vastly different intelligence of the past, but on the limitations and excesses of our present intellect as well. This meticulous meditation on the stones, the statuaries of Luxor, also raised far-reaching questions on the function and nature of history itself. In particular, we begin to see that Egypt may have left us some essential keys to help us find our way towards an integration of things: metaphysical, that is spirit; mathematical, mental, scientific; musical, vibrational, living; and physiological, meaning physical or material. As a civilization, Egypt certainly holds up to us a model of this reintegrated expression of the various planes and parts of our individual natures and of the cosmic life of our universe, and thus may prove of greater value in the spiritual crisis now confronting us than the religious or transcendent adapted from various ancient Eastern cultures. Egypt was not of the lineage that advocates transcendence and denial of material existence. It taught, rather, transformation. The ancient name for Egypt was Kemi, Kemi, meaning black earth, the field of vital transformation. The Arabs, Swaller, that is, points out, called Egypt alchemy, alchemical almost, you see. Can you see that? Al-Kemi. You can see that almost in forming the alchemical in some ways. Can't you see that? Thus, we find in its very name that age-old universal doctrine, so often disguised in symbols and parables. This doctrine encompasses a vision of the principle of matter as a field of existence responsive to and capable of being transformed by spiritual influences brought about through the evolution of embodied and individualized consciousness. The West today could benefit from a philosophy of spiritual depth that does not suppress, diminish, or deny our intellectual and material nature, but rather fulfills our commitment to the meaningfulness of human life and this material expression of the universe. This lost alchemy, the pursuit of which extends back to its flowing or flowering in ancient Egypt, can be seen as the hidden esoteric roots of both civilization and individuals throughout recorded time. It is this same alchemy which is at the core of the vision of the anthropocausium of man as being and containing with himself the entire universe. This vision, which is introduced by Rene Swaller in these pages and expanded and brought to life in his major work called The Temple of Man, leaves us with a single enduring message: the inevitable resurrection of the spiritual essence which has involved itself in matter in the form of organic creative energy. This resurrection depends upon the transformation of the material, that is, the universe, or to express the idea more as Egypt left is imprinted in the stones of Luxor. The birth of divine man, symbolized by the pharaoh, depends upon the transformation of the universe mother, that is the material primal or the matter primal. This transformation was considered the soul, SOLE, cosmic goal. Else, every human birth participates in this alchemy, either in a awakening manner through the intentional perfecting and expressing of one's higher nature or unawakening, through the turmoil and suffering of karmic experiences leading eventually to a spiritual self-awareness, the temple in man. The intensification and heighten of human consciousness was believed to cause biological and even cellular changes in the physical body of the initiative. This divinization of the individual body on the microcosm level comprised the goal and purpose of the evolution of human consciousness in general. Within the Temple of Egypt, cycle of spiritual growth was wedded to precise intellectual and physiological discipline, which acted to accelerate the influence and transformative efforts of spirit over matter. With Egyptian alchemy, we are considering then a science in the highest sense of the word, and one very different from our own. It was science directed towards the embodiment of spiritual knowledge, towards the internalization and corporate expression of intellectual and spiritual powers, rather than the mechanism and utilization of knowledge-power for the exploitation and manipulation of the earthly environment. The temple was the pinnacle of the collective life, ever guiding the energy of the long-lived civilization of the Nile Valley towards the gestation of a divine humanity out of the transitive human form. This is from Robert Lawler. Quote from him, Robert Lawler, Lawlor. The preface here. The purpose of this book is to present indisputable evidence that a symbolic directive was operative in the architecture of the Temple of Luxor. I will examine esoteric symbolism and its significance in ancient Egypt in greater detail in a future book, the outline for which can already be established on the basis of a wealth of documentation. This material now allows us to affirm that what is true for the temple is also true for other monuments from all the Egyptian dynasties. The symbolism evidently having been adapted to the particular consecration of an edifice and to the nature of the place where it was erected. The findings present here are the fruit of 8 years of uninterrupted work carried out by his wife and himself, consisting of very precise surveys of the present layout and the bas reliefs of the Temple of Luxor, and the notations of the measurements. Clement Robichin, architect and head of field work operations of the French Institute of Oriental Archaeological, that is, was responsible for triangulation and for checking all the plans. Triangulation was carried out by means of a Saharian type Morium tachometer, Tachometer, with a 14-centimeter base plate. Understandable, I feel moved at the beginning of this work to thank Egypt warmly for the hospitality it has shown me. In addition, the Department of Antiquities has been very helpful and understanding throughout. For a history of excavations of the Temple of Luxor, the readers refer to G. Daressy, Daressy, quote, I'm not quote, in parentheses, notice explicative des ruins of the Temple of Luxor, published in 1893. A study of detail is required almost uniformly for this reason. We have established a new method of surveying by means of making precise drawings with exact notation of the outlines of the tabloid. The various registers or strata of image found on the walls of Egyptian monuments, the figures, and their main accessories. All these data are included in the drawings in their correct proportions. Complete records of their measurements are also provided. Each drawing of the entire section, once recorded on microfilm, can be projected, thus enabling the exact correlation of separately drawn or carefully photographed text or figure details with the whole. Applying this method, a trained team of 5 or 6 people, guided by the principles I shall set forth in this book, could survey this architecture and decoration of a temple such as that of Luxor in 6 months, a task that took us 8 years. The introduction section of this particular book. Excavations and philosophical studies supplied the Egyptologists with abundant material for a knowledge of the life, the beliefs, In Theology of Ancient Egypt, an encyclopedia amount of work is available to the researcher. Nevertheless, Pharaonic Egypt remains unknown in terms of its true science, its continual psycho-spiritual knowledge, and its philosophical mentality. The text develops the myth transcribed in images, but it has not been possible to translate the deeper meaning of these images into comprehensive language. The philosophical connection of the accumulated data is lacking. One tends to seek in ancient Egypt as well as in Babylon and other traditions of the past what might be called a rational expression of esotericism. This is an error that arises from the prejudice that there is no esotericism, or that there exists a intent to conceal a certain knowledge. However, simple reasoning shows us that, for example, if the Gospels were written to teach the way of truth and to show us what this truth consists of, then the form of parables and enigmatic phrases chosen for for this revelation would be nonsensical if its purpose were to conceal this truth. The purpose of these parables and enigmatic phrases is not to hide anything from he who has eyes to see and ears to hear, according to the evangelical formula. The purpose is to select those who develop the necessary understanding and who are for this reason worthy of those secrets. That is to say, they will not misuse them for selfish motives. These were never any attempt to conceal from those that were prepared any of the wisdom transmitted by texts, traditions, or monuments. The enigma does not lie in the thing itself, but in the result of our understanding and faculties and our intelligence, which are not attuned to the mentality according to which the idea was expressed. And it is just this that our present education prevents us from omitting. However, there is a type of education that's using the vital organs in which the nervous flux and transform, as well as the centers for nodes, NODES, of this flux can awaken consciousness of states that precede and transcend material forms. The West has no terminology for this science, and thus we must have recourse to the Oriental languages. But the words alone are useless without the concepts. Ancient Egypt is in fact one of the major sources of these sciences. However, a true vocabulary of the pharaonic language, or even a provisional one, will never be possible unless attention is given to those questions which we define as psycho-spiritual. The Egyptian symbolism can guide us in this regard and show us meaning other than the common meaning currently accepted for a great many words. In this way, the meaning of many texts will become clear. Rationalism is based on the data provided by the senses, and the senses perceive only a meager part of what is. Thus, through rationalism alone, we can know only what is encountered through the senses, what is ponderable and quantitative. Yet, mathematicians have demonstrated the existence of elements that fall outside the physical. We must take this into account, and if rationalism brings us up against an impenetrable wall, in so doing, it is in fact teaches us that it has its limits, and that we should seek another means of knowledge. We express ourselves in a conventional language, and the dictionary defines and limits the meaning of each word. Therefore, we can understand nothing beyond what the dictionary knows. We write with conventional alphabetical signs that in themselves express only sounds. Thus, our alphabet is merely a mechanical means for composing the words in the dictionary and transmitting the thoughts they encompass. It may be said that the combination of these letters are almost infinite. True, but the number of words is limited by notions already acquired. Thought can also examine observed phenomena and seek the cause. Certainly it can, but as soon as it approaches the metaphysical, it can no longer find it in our language and forms of writing the means of expressing itself. Abstract ideas, formulated in words for which we lack the concepts, are objectified and lose their significance. It follows from these observations that either these exist only a concrete world perceptible to the senses, or we lack a faculty that would enable us to grasp the abstract without having to concretize through the imagination. The process is ingrained in us in accordance with a mode that always leads towards the quantitative definitions. This is the inverse of Egyptian mentality. It is unknown phenomena appears, it is already the concretization of a cause that was abstract for us. Instead of searching out the nature of this cause, we obey our reductivism tendencies and restrict both cause and phenomena to the realms of the mechanical mentality. We investigate nothing deeply. We pull everything down to our own limits or our own levels, you could say. However, a simple image proves to us that there is a way we can express ourselves without limiting our notion to a defined form and transcribe our thoughts without imposing our own mentality on these who will read this image. We have gotten into the habit of reducing everything in time and space. This is the rational habit. An image, on the other hand, gives aspect to a world of qualities and functions. For instance, if we say a man walks, we see a man walking, but we see him in a limited way. We imagine only the fact of moving or walking. We can then place that fact in the past, present, or future. In all the gradations of these tenses, we situate this movement in time and space. If, on the other hand, we see an image that represents a man walking, that is, or simply lines depicting a man, we no longer imagine him. We no longer situate him. He is there. It is the function that interests us, and the quality of that function. We can then paint this man green. It will no longer be solely the function of walking with one leg that it evokes. This movement could also signify vegetation or growth. But to our reason, walking and growing are two different functions, while in reality there is an abstract connection between them. It is a movement outside of consideration of time or pathway or specific direction. If we wish to define this movement, we immediately reduce it into time and space, whereas there is no further need to define the bringing of motion, whether walking or growing. The image, the symbols act as definition, and we can, in fact, experience this condition, unconsciously become one with it without any reasoning, just as any child would looking at a pictures. Thus, the representation, the symbol is our only true means of transmitting a esoteric meaning, which in alphabetical writing we have to seek in parable or possibly metaphor or allegory. The Chinese mentality is characteristic of this transcribed symbolic mentality. The idea is circumscribed but not named. Something of this mentality which we encountered in the Egyptian of the pharaohs has remained among the peoples of the Middle East, the indirect questions and answers. Symbolic representation and imaginative writing are the pure hierarchy forms of esoteric expression. Through symbolism and through it alone can we read the thought of the ancients. It is only through the symbolized or symbolic that we will be able to coordinate the known elements of this great civilization, and that the writing may take on its true meaning. With regard to this mode of expression, I shall quote Ampera, Ampera, that is a Philosophy of the Science, Volume 2, pages 103 and 104. These rites, R-I-T-E-S, these dogmas often conceal ideas once reserved for a small number of initiates, and the secret of these ideas, though buried with them, can be rediscovered by those who study in depth all the types of teaching remaining of the ancient beliefs and the ceremonies they prescribe. Hence, a science given the name of symbolic, that is the name I shall retain for it, proposes to uncover what was hidden behind such diverse emblems. I shall explain more precisely what I mean by the word symbol in the chapter on definitions and in the summary of principles. We also see in the symbol the only means of making a connection between the Oriental mentality and the Occidental mentality, according to the basic distinction currently accepted. But Pharaonic Egypt, which is, in my opinion, the main source of Mediterranean civilization, is in some way closer to us than in the Orient. Its mentality is positive, and expression is symbolic to convey a form of esotericism that does not differ from the others, since wisdom cannot vary if it is real. This symbolic aspect has been completely negated, or neglected, I should say, in Egyptology. It is the proof of existence and the directive stemming from it in the pharaonic expression that I find present with the Temple of Zor. The strangely irregular plan of the temple prompted me to investigate the causes of this irregularities. Since the architectural conception was executed in several phases along the temple longitude axis, hitherto the simple explanation of attributing utilitarian purposes to successive builders had been adopted. In my opinion, only more profound reasons could have inspired these extraordinary constructions, which certainly, on account of the very effort required, could not have been consecrated to inconsequential ideas. Many positive proofs and experiments now confirm the corrections of the way of thinking. Obviously, no one would build such monuments, and in such great numbers over thousands of years for uncultivated peasants. This work is of necessary that of elite, and even more remarkable, a elite that never ceased to renew itself, a elite that seems to have been uniquely endowed with a wealth of scientific knowledge, including understanding of the laws of life. What then was the inexhaustible source, and what means so powerful and so stable assures such continuity? We are dealing here not with an evolution of science, but rather, on the contrary, with an immutable basis for the existence of a language and a form of writing that were already complete from the time of the earliest dynasties of the historical period seem to confirm this. What we see is not the beginning of research, but the application of knowledge already possessed. First of all, our team set out to survey the general plan of the temple, then all its details with the greatest precision possible without concerning ourselves with explanation of the 1001 irregularities observed. I shall explain the outcome of this work in the following pages. The first important thing, though, affording the true explanation of all the idiosyncrasies, that is, was the discovery of axes drawn on the platform of the covered temple. AXES is what it is, axes. Aside from the axes drawn on the ground in the sanctuary of the bark, it was, of course, indispensable to have an original medium axis on which an initial general plan could be based. This axis is marked under the platform at any rate, and it is obvious. The study of these axes shows that each corresponds to a purpose. Each axis is a theme that rules the direction of the construction related to it. In fact, each wall was built in relation to one or another of these three axes, with no regard for the obvious disorder that could ensue. Thus, we have here is a discovery that is extremely important for studying the architecture of the temples and for deciphering the meaning of the pictures and texts traced on their walls. We are dealing here with orientation that is spatial as well as ideological, I should say. This concerns the architectural basis, which happens to be indissoluble linked with the governing idea expressed in the dedication of this temple. We then look for what could be the characteristic symbols of this consecration, a symbol that should conform to the dedication. We begin by finding it in the strange pavings of the covered temple. This paving, in fact, makes no sense if it does not have a purpose. The paving stones, none of which is cut in a curve, are sometimes placed to give the effects of curves. Their apparent disorder curiously resembles a Byzantine mosaic from which the colors have been removed. They contain several shapes that attract the attention, for instance, the curve of an eye outlined by large blocks, the shape of an ear, as well as a channel of the trachea, outlined by a series of juxtaposed slabs. We find in room 20 a bas relief representing the same face as that formed by the elements of the paving. Obviously, this would not afford a definite conclusion, but the canon proportions of the profile and the head and of the head in relation to the body are present. Here, the golden number comes to our aid. It controls all vegetable and animal growth. The following pages are based on these explanations. The outline of a human skeleton, traced according to the anthropologist's metrical methods and very carefully constructed, bone by bone, was superimposed on the general plan of the temple. The head, that is the full face for the skeleton, is located exactly in the sanctuaries of the covered temple. The sanctuary of the bark of Amun, A-M-U-N, is in the oral cavity. The clevises are marked by walls. The chest is located in the first hypostyle of the covered temple and ends with the temple's, platform. The abdomen is represented by the peristyle court, and the pupillus is located exactly as the door separating this peristyle from the colonnade of Amun. This marvelous colonnade is in fact dedicated to the femurs, that is, the thighs. The knees are at the site of the gate in front of which sit the two colossal marking the entrance to this colonnade. This tibulus are in the court of Ramses, framed by the colossal, whose legs, tibulus, are particularly pronounced. The little toe of our skeleton falls exactly as the northwest angle of the pylon. One might be tempted to think this skeleton had been constructed to be superimposed on the temple, but any skeleton, as long as it has harmonious, like the one represented here, can be projected thus on the plan of the temple and will coincide with it. Moreover, all the proportions of the skeleton may be checked against the actual measurements of the temple. For my report, it was necessary to have recourse to the Egyptian canon. I have in this regard devoted a chapter to a subject that has never been dealt with until now, the importance, that is, the ancients according the crown of the skull, the Kaaba. This crown of the skull, marked off in Egyptian figuration by a headband, a diadem, a headdress, or a crown, is veritably revelation with regard to psycho-spiritual knowledge of the ancients. This is made clear by the placement of the principal organs of the intellect and of all the control mechanisms of life in the various sanctuaries, whose figurations, texts, and architecture specify their purpose. The temple of Luxor is indisputably devoted to the human microcosm. This consecration is not merely a simple attribution. The entire temple becomes a book explaining the secret functions of the organs and nerve centers. I have had to limit myself here solely to demonstrating the symbolism and directs the temple's architecture without entering into a study of this magnificent book. My aim is to draw the attention of those who are interested and to place archaeologists on the alert. If it were to adapt this point of view, Egyptology would no longer be a sterile science. I have inserted a chapter giving the general idea of philosophy of measures, not that they enter in a proof of symbolism, but because it is a measure that enables me to discover the method of applying the symbolic. It is also the purpose of this explanation to indicate the mentality of the master builders and the ancient Egyptians in general. This study of measures has also shown us evidence of their astronomical science. I have numerous proofs of this and shall have occasion to discuss it in a great length elsewhere, as well as their undeniable knowledge of geodesy, Geodesy. If in my report each chapter is presented as an island connected to the other only by a government line of thought, this too corresponds to the pharaonic mentality. The subject under discussion is so vast that I had the choice of writing a lengthy book which would have greatly delayed publication or a very concise outline rendered intelligence by complementary figures and diagrams. All the data relating to my thesis have been checked rigorously and may be verifiable at the site. The mentality that directs me, that I attempt to convey, will of course be opposed by the rationalists that dominate modern thought. I am concerned with discovering the thought of the ancients, and I feel that it is the investigation of causes. There are three possible ways: rationalism, framed and limited by matter; pure faith, which is a perfect way as long as this faith is absolute, and all philosophical speculation is eliminated; and third, the philosophical way. But this leads nowhere unless the means employed are adopted or adapted to the goal. These are the means that ancient Egypt teaches us through its mentality and symbolism. To conclude, I shall again draw Egyptologists' attention to the two methods of inscription that I call transposition and transparency. These constitute a new and very important key for the study of texts and figurations. It is necessary to note that there is in transposition and transparency no intent to conceal a teaching. On the contrary, their purpose is to explain vital functions symbolically. Thus, a naos, that is a proportionate and decorated shrine intended to hold a sacred object, a baroque, a god ceremony boat, a linen chest are not simply cult items or objects for daily use. They also represent organs and functions of life, man being taken as the summation of all the possibilities immanent in the universe. However, the Egyptians apparently considered the organs of the human body images of the divine universal organism themselves, too sacred to be used directly as symbols for the types most specifically representative of the development of the organs were chosen from among the animals and vegetable kingdoms. In fact, an animal or a plant as the type of a given organism of a given function is fully characterized. It is entire way of life or the rhythm of this organ or this function. Moreover, this opens to us the possibility of a vital classification of fauna, F-A-U-N-A, and flora, each species or type becoming a stage of genesis of which man, as the supreme creature, is the summation, the temple of universal life. Now, what I want to do here is I'm going to show you something here in this particular book. So this is what it looks like. I'm trying to give you this here. What I recommend sometimes is maybe you should do an interlibrary loan on this particular book and basically read it yourselves and look at some of the artwork or what he did in this particular work. Now remember, Rene Swaller wrote quite a few books, so you may want to do a research on that. Also on Wikipedia. Unfortunately, the guy is no longer living. Let's see if there's anything else. We'll go to the next chapter. Let me continue on here. Now we're going to look at the definitions here. In order that no confusion remain in the determination of my concepts, I shall begin by defining some of the words used in this work. The term cerebral, that is C-E-R-E, brawl, B-R-A-L, consciousness, and cerebral intelligence, plus the adjective vital, defining vital functions, vital logic, etc., are used in special new senses. First one is consciousness. If a cause origin of the universe is omitted, it is of necessity unique. However, if reason imposes on us the idea of indivisible, i.e., quantity less unity, the idea of this unity eludes our point of view as creatures forming part of this universe, a consequence of the unique cause. This unity exists for us only if comparison is possible, but comparison signifies consciousness and duality. Thus, creation is accomplished entirely between the number 1 and 2, and duality is the basic characteristic of the created universe. This duality is the principle of sexuality. Duality implies comparison with a series of phenomena which produces cerebral consciousness. Unity creates by looking at itself. It is the falling angel of the Judeo-Christian tradition and also the Adamic error in the Genesis of Moses. We may call this unity God or unpolarized energy, in that this unity is indivisible, and God, the creator, or polarized energy insofar as it is the unity conscious of itself. Therefore, the universe is only consciousness and presents only a evolution of consciousness from beginning to end, which is the return to its cause. The aim of every initiative religion is to teach the way that leads to the ultimate merging. Celibate consciousness, which is peculiar to the animal kingdom and the human animal, requires the faculty of registering notions that are only acts of comparison, and this faculty is located in the cerebral cortex and the double cerebral lobes. On the other hand, understanding, intellect, or reason is the faculty of synthesis in the coordination of ideas, and its functionality centered in the pituitary and pineal bodies, the hypothesis and the epiphysis, PHYSIS, sorry about that. This is what the ancients called the intelligence of the heart, because its impulse is manifest through the solar plexus, that is the sympathetic nerve, the emotional center, and its direct physical reaction upon the heart. Life. Various definitions have been given for the term life, the best of which seems to be the faculty of assimilating a food and transmuting it into the nature of the living being. Any germinating seed, or any seed capable of germinating, is a cause of influence of life, and gestation is life. But when the living beings, whether vegetable or animal, achieves its aim, which is a new seed, its organism deteriorates, in that it is complex generating the seed, that is male, or gestation, the being female, but death does not extinguish all life in the component parts of this individual. Putrefaction makes from them new lives, animal or vegetable. To be sure, it is always a matter of assimilation, but to another rhythm, with another character. The definition is philosophically true, but I propose another one, which applied to everything, including minerals, is more correct because it is more general. Life is the faculty of reaction. Everything in this universe tends towards inertia, or absence of reaction. The proof of this inertia, which thermodynamics seeks, is absolute zero. Has never been given, nor will it ever be, because absolute inertia can only be attained through the cessation of the form. When he's speaking of evolution of innate consciousness towards psychological consciousness, which is consciousness of the innate consciousness, that is the first stage towards a consciousness freed from physical contingencies. And then he has another note here, a footnote saying higher reason and St. Thomas intellectualists. So back to the cessation of the form, matter, or thing, this would be the moment of the thing ceased to exist. Everything existing is capable of reaction insofar as it has weight, that is fixed or specific energy. The vital phenomenon is the faculty of reacting, and to manifest itself that this reaction requires a resistance of the same nature as the action. Thus, the living stomach produces the juices necessary for digesting because of this signal or resistance of the thing to be digested. That's amazing, isn't it? Isn't it when you think about it? It produces its own thing to break it down. In exactly the same way, the anvil, that is the resistance, produce reaction or suppression of weight. The elasticity that is, in the hammer, activity that strikes it. Whether in the field of chemistry, biology, or mechanics, the law remains the same. There has to be a action, a resistance of the same nature, and the reaction or effect. The whole is the vital phenomenon. I draw a parallel with vital logic and cerebral, or equation, that is to say, synchronicities, that is synchronicity, that is logic. The latter is simply mechanical logic, quantitative logic, the comparison of two elements to find a third, which is quantitative equation. On the other hand, vital logic is purely functional and quantitatively unforeseeable, that is, because of the multitudes of elements that can enter into elaboration of the result, since here it is the question of gestation. Vital logic applies to the reaction or vital function. It has the exact law, which is the law of Genesis, the supreme natural expression of which is given by the phase of the embryo and its fetal genesis of man. Symbol and symbolism. The meaning currently accepted for the word symbol always implies a conventional nature, a figure or a sign represents, by an analogy or convention, a given idea. To conform with the true meaning of the symbol, in ancient Egypt, we ought to use the Egyptian term metu naturio. The Greek translation of which is hieroglyphics distorts the Egyptian meaning. Metu naturia are the netters or the principles conveyed by a sign. To me, the word symbol signifies the thing itself or the materialistic idea that is evokes. It does not represent the idea by analogy alone. There is a reality, that is to say, a cause with an irreliable effect. In the middle letters or symbols, as in the Christian image of the cross, the statue of the Holy Virgin, the gestures and the words of sacraments of the Mass, in the life or legend of the saint from whom the religion takes its name. Every image, however primitive it may be, leaves its mark. It evokes a memory, and only that which one has known or lived can be remembered. One puts into the image the something of oneself. The image then no longer represents this memory. It is the memory that is transplanted in the image. In this sense, even the conventional symbol becomes real, like an official badge or rank, a symbolic sword, the robes of high office. It is certainly not the habit that makes the monk, but oblige the monk to wear secular clothing, and something in his attitude will change, and thereby something in his inner disposition. In every instance, the symbol, even if it is be chosen totally arbitrarily, makes its mark. Because of necessity, it evokes a complex of thoughts that are projected into it, and it is the projection that then confronts us. This manner of conceiving the symbol opens the door to a theme that would require lengthy development. When I use the word symbol for lack of another, more precise word, I am thinking of the nature of the natural symbol and of the figuration that it is the idea projected into the thing represented. He does give a little illustration here, what he calls merit, a organ that is no longer shows in its adult stage. I must find this organ in an adult lower animal whose development was arrested at the stage considered embryonic. Inversely, in the pharaonic sense, the natural thing or being in none other than the materialization of the idea of which it is the symbol, the bird living in the air has the aerial nature through its habits, you see, life, nourishment, methods of hunting, affinities and enmities and character, mode of assimilation, etc. It becomes the incarnation of a function of a stage in the universal genesis and finally of the idea. Thus, every natural thing is the incarnation of a principle. It is the principle symbol. Next section is called Summary of Principles. Life is the faculty of reacting. This formula extends the definition of life to include minerals. We do not distinguish inorganic bodies from organic bodies so as to accord life only to the latter. We admit that there are organized beings and others which are not yet organized, but the latter bear in their characteristics, for example, chemical affinity, the elements that gives a impetus for future organizations. This, however, will not take place in a continuous fashion, but through the necessary destruction of forms for the purpose of rebirth, so to speak, in higher states. It is not the form that is transmitted, but the permanent moment of the substance. This permanent moment, that is the Egyptian Ka, registers, that is, the experience of the transitional form. Thus, life is in all things a tentative, complex formed by an active cause against a passive resistance that is nonetheless reaction in turn. This reaction is the apparent effort, and the whole is the vital phenomenon. Next word he gives summary of principles is intelligence. As a double nature, intellect or reason is direct intelligence beyond all comparison. It is the intelligence of the human being who, incarnating all the possibilities of the universe, knows this universe without having to reason it. On the other hand, cerebral intelligence requires comparison and constitutes psychological consciousness, which distinguishes man from animal. This cerebral intelligence is that of the Adam, human beings falling into irrelevant nature. Next, the symbol. In our modern language, there is no word that designates the exact meaning of symbol, as it was conceived by the ancients. This is why I should like to replace the word symbol with the word netter, which conveys the signs that bear the netters. Netter signifies the principle or the idea in the Platonic sense. For me, a plant or animal, for example, is a symbol of a whole collection of vital elements crystallized in that plant or animal, which can be what it is only through the conditions and circumstances causing its birth. Each is the manifestation of an idea and constitutes a link to the evolution of consciousness from the original verb up to the conscious return into the cause. Each natural symbol may be considered as a word and a phrase that, in reuniting all words, alone can define that abstraction which is called God. So I'm going to stop there at this point and give me a break. This is all what I call the preface of the particular book. And then we'll probably get into chapter 1. And I'm going to take a break and get something to drink and eat a little bit here. And I'll come back and we'll get into chapter 1. So we'll be starting a different area. So I appreciate you all being here. Thomas Blackburn. The author is, his name is Rene, R-E-N-E. He has what I call R-A. I don't know what the A stands for. Rene's R-E-N-E. Swaller, S-C-H-W-A-L-L-E-R, de Lubicz. That is L-A-B-I-C-Z. I usually just say Swaller, to be honest with you. This is the book was done by Autumn Press book. And it's just simply called The Temple of Man, The Secrets of Ancient Egypt. And this book was translated, because I think he was French, so it's translated into the English. So we've just gone through basically about 24, 25 pages here. So, and he will go into more here in this book. Again, like I said, if you're in the United States, you can probably get this. You can get this book without having to pay anything by interlibrary loan, Thomas. That's what I would suggest. Okay. All right. I'm going to conclude it right now, and we'll come back later. Okay. Thank you.